Before we start, this grind test reflects my personal experience, not a universal verdict on the spot. Your results will vary depending on your class, gear, buffs, rotation, skill level, and marketplace prices. I also don't min-max these grinds. I'm fairly a lazy grinder and usually have a stream or video playing on my second monitor. So these numbers represent realistic, somewhat distracted gameplay rather than perfect efficiency. I deliberately push zones that may be above what is normally recommended. So this isn't necessarily a guide telling you where you should grind. I'm simply showing what I was able to accomplish, sharing the numbers, and giving you my honest opinion. Before I start dragging the season character into grind zones where it probably has no business being, we need to establish a baseline. For the first episode, I tested 4 conventional seasoned grind spots that most Black Desert players will probably recognize: Polly's Forest, Crescent Shrine, Cadry Ruins, and Bloodwolf Settlement. These are not obscure endgame spots, weird challenge grinds, or places where survival itself is part of the experiment. These are established recommendations that seasoned players are commonly sent toward for silver, progression items, or both. The goal of this episode is to find out what these spots realistically produce for me using a normal season character, a straightforward buff setup, and 3 hours of grinding at each location. At the end, we'll compare the results, talk about what actually created the silver, and add all 4 spots to the season grind tier list. For every test, I was grinding on the new class Agent, wearing full PEN Tuvala gear. My total stats were 452 AP and 389 DP unbuffed. For buffs, I kept the setup fairly simple. I used a simple Cron meal, an Adventurer's Boon, a Body Enhancement, Villa, and a Tachros Spirit Stone. If I used my damage crystal setup, I am 827 AP and 381 DP. If I used one of my resist crystal setups, I am 800 AP and 407 DP. There is one other important detail before we look at the individual spots. Not every hour of this test was completed on a season server. Because these tests were recorded shortly after Agent released, the lower level grind zones were heavily contested by players leveling the new class. When I could find a usable rotation, I remained on the season server. When I could not, I moved to a normal server so I could complete a full uninterrupted hour. If you plan to grind these spots during a busy season, your best option is Marnie's Realm, which provides a private rotation. Your other option is developing a thick skin, because rotation etiquette on a season server can occasionally become more of a suggestion than a rule. Players may grind over you, under you, around you, or somehow accomplish all 3 at once. Season servers still offer one major benefit, especially for veteran players running low on loot scrolls. During my season server hours, I earned between 800 and 1,000 time-filled Blackstones. That is enough to exchange for approximately 4 to 5 level 1 loot scrolls. I have not included that value in the silver totals, but it is an additional benefit worth considering. We are starting with Polly's Forest. Polly's is one of the most recognizable season player recommendations in Black Desert. The requirements are low, the mobs are tightly packed, the rotation is easy to understand, and there is almost no meaningful danger for a character in PEN Tuvala. It also drops a tennis elements, which gives players access to additional progression rewards outside of the direct silver earned from the grind. For this test, Polly acts as our control group. It is safe, a familiar recommendation against which the other 3 locations will be measured. The question is not whether Polly's is functional, the question is whether it's still competitive. From a gameplay perspective, Polly's is exactly what most players expect. The mobs die quickly, there is little downtime, and the grind does not require much concentration. This is the kind of spot where I can comfortably have a video or stream playing on my second monitor without worrying that one missed mechanic will introduce my character to the floor. Because of the density of the mobs and how quickly they were dying, you'll notice a fair amount of loot being left behind. If you want to maximize efficiency, you can manually pick up drops or simply avoid rushing to the next pack and allow your pets a bit more time to clean up. On a personal note, I ran into some stamina issues here. This is likely due to my, let's call it, smooth brain movement and poor use of mobility skills rather than anything specific to the spot, but it did become noticeable during longer rotations. The main limitation at a spot like Polly's is not usually whether your character can kill the mobs, it's how efficiently you can move between the packs and how quickly your pets can collect everything you leave behind. After 3 hours at Polly's Forest, I earned a total of approximately 1.2 billion silver. Based on that total, the test averaged approximately 419 million silver per hour. That does not make Polly's an extraordinary grind spot, but it does establish a respectable and relatively uncomplicated baseline. There was no single rare drop carrying the entire test. There was no marketplace item creating a sudden billion silver hour. It was just simply 3 hours of accessible, repeatable, seasoned grind. My provisional verdict for Polys is that it remains a solid, lazy grinding option. It is safe, easy, consistent, and requires very little mental investment. However, comfort does not automatically make it the strongest financial choice. Polys has established our baseline at roughly 419 million per hour. Now we need to see whether the other conventional recommendations can beat it without relying on luck. Next, we have Crescent Shrine. Crescent has very low gear requirements relative to some of the income figures commonly associated with the spot. It also provides access to Atanis elements and has historically been known for Ring of Crescent Guardian drops. On paper, Crescents looked like it had the potential to outperform Polys while remaining accessible to a full PEN Tuvala season character. Unfortunately, my test did not support that expectation. The grind itself was not especially difficult. With PEN Tuvala gear, there was almost no meaningful danger to survivability. Again, the more important question was whether the drops and trash loot could generate enough value to justify choosing Crescents over the other spots in this episode. Honestly, grinding here brought back some memories. With the changes they did a while back to the mob spawn timers, the rotation itself isn't really something you need to think about anymore. Packs respawn fast enough that you can just keep moving without ever feeling like you're waiting on the spot to catch up. The main pain point, if there really is one, is the travel to Crescent Shrine. Everything else about the grind feels fairly smooth on Agent, but that downtime kind of sucks. Across the 3-hour test, the income never developed into the result I expected, based on the spot's reputation. After 3 hours, Crescent Shrine produced a total of approximately 978 million silver. Based on that total, the average was approximately 326 million silver per hour. That places Crescents below Polly's Forest by roughly 93 million silver per hour. Across the full 3-hour test, Polly's earned approximately 279 million more silver. For a zone that looked like one of the stronger conventional choices before the test began, this was a disappointing result. My provisional verdict is that Crescent Shrine underperformed. It was accessible, and there was no issue actually clearing the mobs, but the income from these 3 hours did not justify recommending it over Polly's Forest. That does not mean every player will receive the same result. A stronger run of accessory drops could dramatically change the average, but based on what I actually earned, Crescents is currently our weakest conventional option. Our third location is Cadry Ruins. Cadry is another low requirement grind spot that is frequently compared against other early and mid season recommendations. Unlike Polly's, Cadry has a major marketplace dependency. A large portion of the value comes from the ring of Cadry Guardian. If that accessory maintains a strong price, Cadry can produce very attractive results. If the price falls, the grind spot falls with it. During this test, Cadry performed significantly better than both Polly's and Crescent Shrine. The spot did not require the same kind of extreme rare drop luck that we will see later at Blood Wolves, but it still benefited from favorable marketplace conditions. This was another nostalgia-filled grind for me. I remember spending hours here in the early days of BDO running this exact rotation on repeat. The train and the structure of the Cadry area still feel familiar and comfortable, with clear loops that make it easy to maintain a consistent pull once you settle in. I really like what the developers have done by removing the Cadry commanders as a fixed spawn and turning them into a random event. It keeps the spot feeling a bit more alive and unpredictable. That said, I do miss the old feeling of your heartbeat jumping out of your chest when the gatekeeper would suddenly appear right in the middle of your rotation. From a practical standpoint, inventory can start to creep up here depending on how long you stay, but the rotation itself remains smooth and manageable. Agent handled the spot well overall with no real issues, maintaining pace once the loop was established. This is an important distinction. Cadry's success was not created by a single absurd final hour. The value was more repeated across the test, but it was still tied to a current price of its main accessory. After 3 hours at Cadry Ruins, I earned approximately 2 billion silver. That produced an average of approximately 699 million silver per hour. That was roughly 280 million silver per hour higher than Polly's Forest and more than double the average I achieved at Crescent Shrine. Of the tests we have seen so far, Cadry is comfortably in first place. However, that result comes with a warning label. The Ring of Cadry Garden is doing meaningful work inside this total. If that item crashes in price, the value of this grind will change with it. My provisional verdict is that Cadry Ruins produced the best repeatable income of the episode so far. The results were dramatically stronger than Polly's and Crescent without requiring one exceptional jackpot hour. However, I would still check that marketplace before committing to a long Cadry grind. This is not a completely market-proof income source. At current prices, Cadry looks excellent. At significantly lower accessory prices, the conclusion could be very different. Our final conventional grind spot is Blood Wolf Settlement. Blood Wolves is commonly recommended for two reasons. The first is direct silver. The second is progression toward infinite HP potion through the pity pieces and the full potion drop. Blood Wolves also has access to Kagtunak, which can be used to create dark red fang crystals. At the time of this test, both dark red fang crystal variants were sold out on the North American marketplace, with pre-orders sitting at approximately 50 million silver. The marketplace situation turned out to be extremely important. For most of the test, Blood Wolves was not producing anything remotely close to the final average you are about to see. The ordinary income was competitive with Crescent, but was not threatening Cadry or even clearly separating itself from Polly's. Then the final hour happened. During that final hour, I received 5 Kagtunaks. Not one, not two, 5. Because the dark red fang crystals were sold out with large pre-orders, those 5 drops transformed the entire 3-hour test. With the Kagtunak included, Blood Wolf Settlement produced a total of approximately 2.9 billion silver. That gave the spot an average of approximately 979 million silver per hour. Based only on the final totals, Blood Wolves destroyed every other location in this episode. It beat Cadry by approximately 280 million silver per hour. It more than doubled Polly's, and it almost tripled the average I earned at Crescent Shrine. But representing that number without context would be incredibly misleading. Without that 5 keg tuneg final hour, Blood Wolves would have produced a total of approximately 970 million silver. That would have resulted in an average of approximately 323 million silver per hour. In other words, without the lucky final hour, Blood Wolves would have finished last. The Kagtunak value added approximately 1.9 billion silver to the test. That means roughly 67% of the entire observed value came from those drops. This is why averages from short grind tests need context. The 970 million figure is real, might earn to the drops, and the marketplace demand existed, but it is not a number I would expect to reproduce consistently. My verdict for Blood Wolves depends entirely on why you are there. If you are grinding for the infinite potion, the pity pieces, and the full chance provided meaningful progression value beyond the direct silver, if the Dark Fang crystal market remains sold out, the Kagtunak can also create an enormous upside. But if you are choosing the spot strictly for predictable silver, my test does not support the headline average. Blood Wolves had the highest observed result, but it did not have the strongest dependable income. It is a progression grind with jackpot potential, not a guaranteed billion silver per hour grind. Now that all 4 tests are complete, here are the final observed results. Polly's Forest produced approximately 1.2 billion silver, averaging around 419 million per hour. Crescent Shrine produced approximately 978 million silver, averaging around 326 million per hour. Cadry Ruins produced approximately 2 billion silver, averaging around 699 million per hour. Blood Wolf Settlement produced approximately 2.9 billion silver, averaging around 979 million per hour. However, without the 5 Kagtunak, Blood Wolves would have averaged approximately 323 million silver per hour. That leaves us with 2 different ways to interpret this episode. If we ranked purely by what entered my inventory, Blood Wolves wins. If we rank by the strongest result that did not depend on exceptional jackpot hour, Cadry wins comfortably. For the highest observed income, the winner is Blood Wolf Settlement. For the strongest non-jackpot result, the winner is Cadry Ruins. For the safest and most comfortable conventional grind, I would give the win to Polly's Forest. For the most disappointing performance relative to expectations, Crescent Shrine takes the award. And for the result most likely to mislead someone who only looks at the final average, Blood Wolf Settlement wins again. The spot produced a number, but the number needs the giant 5 Kagtunak asterisk attached to it. Now that we have looked at the results, the consistency, the market dependencies, and the reasons someone might actually grind each location, it's time to place them on a season grind tier list. These placements are based primarily on repeatable silver, comfort, progression, value, and how easy the spot is to recommend under the conditions I tested. Starting with Crescent Shrine, I am placing it in D tier. The spot was easy enough to grind, and survivability was never an issue, but the results did not give me a reason to choose it over the alternatives. At approximately 326 million silver per hour, it fell behind Polly's Forest and offered less upside than Blood Wolves. Crescent's is functional, but based on these 3 hours, it was simply outclassed. Next is Blood Wolf Settlement, which I am placing in C tier. The observed result was the highest in the episode, but most of that value came from the 5 Kagtunak during one exceptional final hour. Without those drops, the average falls to approximately 323 million silver per hour, which would place it at the bottom of the episode. However, Blood Wolf still offers meaningful infinite potion progression and enormous jackpot potential when the dark red fang crystal market is favorable. So I would describe Blood Wolves as C tier for dependable silver, with better progression value and much higher upside than raw placement may suggest. Polly's Forest goes into B tier. It did not produce spectacular income, but it gave me approximately 419 million silver per hour without relying on a jackpot or a single high value marketplace item. The grind was safe, simple, consistent, and extremely easy to maintain while paying partial attention to something on my second monitor. Polly's is not the strongest financial option, but it remains an easy spot to recommend for players who value comfort and consistency. Finally, Cadry Ruins goes into A tier. At approximately 699 million silver per hour, Cadry produced the strongest result that did not depend on one extraordinary jackpot hour. The Cadry ring price is doing meaningful work inside that total, so this placement is still dependent on a current marketplace condition. The market risk keeps Cadry out of S tier, but during this test, it clearly outperformed other conventional options and provided the strongest overall combination of income and repeatability. That leaves Cadry the strongest conventional choice in episode 1. Polly as the reliable lazy grind, Blood Wolves as the progression and jackpot option, and Crescent Shrine as the spot I currently have the least reason to recommend. The biggest lesson from these tests is that silver per hour does not tell the entire story. Polly's produced a modest but dependable result. Crescent's underperformed. Cadry produced excellent income, but its success is tied to the ring of the Cadry Guardian. Blood Wolves produced the highest average, but almost the entire advantage came from the 5 Kagtunak in one exceptional hour. So based on this test, Cadry is my strongest overall conventional season choice. Polly's remains a solid option for players who value comfort and consistency. Blood Wolf makes sense for potion progression for anyone willing to chase a high value Kagtunak spike. And Crescent Shrine did not give me a reason to choose it over the alternatives. These 4 spots have now established our conventional baseline. From here, we can begin testing what happens when this full PEN Tuvala agent starts moving into grind zones that seasoned characters are not normally expected to handle. This is where the project should start becoming considerably less sensible. Let me know which of these 4 results surprised you the most. Would you take a reliable income at Cadry, the comfortable grind at Polly's, or gamble on another 5 Kagtunak hour at Blood Wolves? And is there a season accessible grind spot you think this agent has absolutely no business attempting? Leave it in the comments. There's a fairly good chance I'll try it anyway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next grind test.